Hey guys, welcome to a new Q&A. So the first question today is, I find training twice a week great for many reasons, but here's a possible downside. Training is not merely physical. There are many mental benefits. With infrequent training, you also reduce yourself to that beneficial cocktail of neurotransmitters. What is your opinion? So this is a question I get very often, and it's one of the main objections guys have to training less. A lot of guys use the gym as an escape mechanism and their mental health goes to shit if they can't work out every day. But I have a saying, right? You can work out more or you can get results. And I'm dead fucking serious because you can choose to work out more than 2 to 3 times per week, and that's totally okay, but you probably won't get the physique you want. And if you're okay with that and you're more into exercise for the mental benefits, then go for it by all means. But here's the thing, right? This is strictly talking about strenuous weight training. We're not talking about all the other activities you can do on top of your training. Personally, I get 10 to 12,000 steps per day, and I recommend everyone to do the exact same. If you're in my Herculean bulking program, you'll know that I'm huge on walking, and I recommend getting 8 to 12,000 steps a day even when you're bulking, because walking and lifting is the shit when it comes to health and looking good. And I know there are plenty of guys in my Herculean bulking program who do martial arts, and they love the program because they can balance it with training and building muscle. So I would always tell you to keep your training and your exercise separate. Focus on training hard 2 to 3 times per week in the gym, and then get your walking in every day, and then you can throw in other hobbies on top of that. That's the beauty of training twice per week. It gives you the time and flexibility to do the things you love outside of the gym. The next question is, if you are very skinny and not a beginner in the gym, would you recommend extending the bulking period beyond the usual 9 to 10 months, maybe up to a year or longer? So yeah, I wouldn't worry about a bulking period. I would just focus on bulking continuously until you're not skinny anymore, because if you're skinny, you don't have any business cutting anyway. You have nothing to cut down to. So I would put in a good 2-year bulking period to give yourself the time necessary to gain muscle. I think everyone who's in their first few years of training needs to give themselves a period of 2 years to bulk continuously and focus on building a real foundation. This is what I wish I did when I started training, but instead I was too worried about my abs, and they were skinny boy abs that every fucking skinny dude has. And I had this exact situation with one of my coaching clients recently. He's been training for about 3 years, and for the first 2 years, he didn't see any progress because he was following conventional fitness instruction and training 4+ days a week. And then he found my content, he applied the philosophy, and he's been making incredible progress for the past year. But since he wasn't following proper training for the first couple of years, he still doesn't have the muscle development he wants. So of course I want him to bulk because I know that he needs to continue paying his dues. But recently he told me he wants to start cutting, and I'm like, bro, why? Why? Then he just basically said, like, I just want to cut for a couple months to trim off my body fat, and then I'll get back on my bulk. It won't make a difference. Keep in mind, he barely has any body fat, right? And I explained to him that when you transition into a cut, you're killing all muscle and strength building momentum, and you're prolonging the time it will take you to achieve the body that you really want. It's 10 times more powerful to just continuously bulk for a long period of time than to keep jumping from bulks to cuts. Now, when you're happy with your muscle development and you're not skinny, then yes, you want to follow a cyclical process of bulking and cutting each year. But when you're still skinny, you need to bulk and pay your dues for a while before you can start cutting, because you have nothing to cut down to yet. You can't chisel a pebble. So for the next question, there are 2 similar ones that I'll touch on at the same time. How do you calculate your calorie intake? And then how do you calculate calories for fat loss? So you start with finding your maintenance calories. And the way I do that is I take my body weight and I multiply it by 14 to 16. If you're sedentary, then use 14. And if you're active, use 16. For some people, this is dead on accurate, but for others, it's just a rough estimate. So what you want to do next is eat at this calorie intake for a few weeks and watch the scale to see how your weight changes. And during this period, you want to weigh yourself every day under the same circumstances, which should be in the morning right after you wake up. And then you want to track your daily weight and track your calories closely. The goal here is to test this calorie intake and see whether your body weight stays constant or not over the 3 weeks. After the 3 weeks are over, you'll need to calculate your average weekly weight. So if your body weight from all 3 weeks is constant, then you found your maintenance calorie intake. Don't worry if it fluctuates 1 pound up or down. It doesn't need to be perfect, but if you gain or lose more than 1 pound, you need to adjust accordingly. So if you lose weight, add an extra 100 to 200 calories per day. And if you gain weight, reduce your daily intake by 100 to 200 calories per day, and continue to track your calories while watching your body weight to see if it stays constant. You can always adjust your calorie intake along the way, so you don't need to get this perfect, and it's likely that your calorie needs are going to change anyways. as you gain muscle. But once you've found your maintenance calories, then the hard work is done, and then you can create a calorie surplus or a calorie deficit. For muscle growth, the sweet spot is a 300 calorie surplus daily. And for fat loss, you can do a 300 to 500 calorie deficit. So if you have more fat to lose, do 500. If you don't have that much fat to lose, then take it slower and do a 300 to 400 calorie deficit. The next question is, do you have any advice or experience with elbow tendinitis from heavy pulling days? So yeah, I have a lot of experience with elbow tendinitis. It's very common to get it from weighted chin-ups. The most effective way to fix it from my experience is to do wrist curl negatives with a dumbbell. So you want to get some blood flow to the area that's tender. And when you're doing the negatives, you want to stop and hold the dumbbell for a few seconds when you find that spot. So you can do a couple sets of these after your workouts, a couple times a week. The rep range doesn't really matter that much. You just want to make sure you're getting blood flow to the tender area and stretching it out a little bit. The next question is, how would you combine running 30 kilometers per week with weight training? So I wouldn't do much long distance running if your goal is to have a great physique. If anything, I would focus on sprints instead. But if I had to make it work, I would of course work out twice per week and then make sure that I'm eating and sleeping enough. So your maintenance calories are probably very high. So I'd put a heavy focus on making sure you're still in a calorie surplus, and then outside of your running and weight training, try to relax and recover as much as possible. So the next question is, what are your strength stats before and after adopting this training method? Genuinely curious. Your videos got me to finally train consistently. Thanks, man. Well, it's my pleasure, bro. As far as my strength stats before, I was still doing a lot of shit wrong when I adopted this style of training that negatively impacted my gains for a while, mainly not bulking properly and skipping out on squats and deadlifts. Thankfully, I didn't waste too much time on shitty training methods before I started figuring things out. It was probably like 6 to 12 months of following mainstream bodybuilding stuff before I started uncovering the philosophy I teach now. I can tell you that my strength and physique didn't improve for shit during that first year doing the high volume, high frequency bodybuilding training. It was really the combination of learning the importance of bulking properly and the low volume, high intensity training approach that I teach now that really skyrocketed my strength and physique. And that took me a while to figure out. So that's it for today's Q&A, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments section if you did, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.